Foster4, your local council in Cheshire and Merseyside, are bringing you an exciting new podcast series. Join us as we chat all things fostering with some of Cheshire and Merseyside's most experienced and knowledgeable foster carers. We'll be covering topics relating to fostering, from making that first step to what it looks like after 40 years. We'll have interviews with people in our fostering community and young people who want to share their experiences with you. We hope listening gives you an insight into the amazing role of fostering and why fostering for your local authority will be helping children in your local community. This podcast has been funded by UK Government.
Hello and welcome back to the Foster4 podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about teenagers who've been in residential care and who were looking for foster carers to provide safe and loving homes for them in their teenage years. Hello and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to introduce to our listeners, who you are and what your role is within? You work for Warrington Council?
Absolutely. So my name's Chantelle Williams. I am the manager of the Lighthouse, which is a children's home and a service that works with families that are on the edge of care.
So what exactly is edge of care? What does that mean?
That means there's families that are potentially open to social care that need that extra bit of support and help for the young people to remain living in their family home. But there is that risk that certain things could happen and they could end up coming into care due to family breakdown, crisis points within the relationships within their family, meaning that they would end up coming into the care of the local authority.
So when they come into the care of the local authority, would they remain within the residential home that you run?
Yes. So the idea of our service is that our workers will work with the family together to try and keep that young person out of care. If it gets to the point where actually that's not sustainable or safe right now, then they will come into the home, but they'll already know some of the workers. They'll already be
that relationship still
absolutely
there.
Familiar, trusted adults, both for the young person and for the family. We're not. We're still working with that family. We don't just sort of go hands off at the point that they come into care. That's where we kick into the next level of, working together to try and resolve conflict and try to reunite them with the family if it's possible and safe to do so, which, as we know, sadly, that's not always the case.
And when it's not the case and they can't return to families or wider family,
mm-hmm.
they remain within the residential setting.
They do.
And what does that look like for them? What can you just kind of explain to our listeners what a residential home is like?
Yeah, so, we are highly regulated by Ofsted. We are, a team of very passionate adults who want the best caring, nurturing environment for the young people. However, there's no escaping the fact that it is a home that has staff that will change. They will do a shift during the day. Different people will come in and sleep overnight. And we will support them and make sure that all of their basic needs are met, that they're fed, have access to education, and not just basic needs, that we'd take them out on nice activities and have fun with them and, anything that you would want for your own child, we strive and aim to make sure they have that. However, they haven't got that family, they haven't got that nurturing support of one family that they belong to. And I suppose that's the thing that's missing from a residential home.
So that's where we're coming in as the fostering service.
Absolutely.
And we are really actively looking for people who would consider caring for older children, particularly in this case. And often that's a really challenging thing because people hear teenagers and they're in residential and they might make assumptions and have experience of what that has looked like in the media, when actually the reality of that couldn't be further from the truth a lot of the times.
Absolutely. No, you're very right, because a lot of the time it's assumed that potentially teenagers in care have been in care for most of their life. That's not always the case. Often families have tried to keep things together for a long time, and it could be parental mental health or other issues, meaning that actually they've just got to a point where the parents that say, I actually can't cope, I can't do this, the young person needs to come into care, and nobody will give them a chance because they're 13 and not 11.
Yeah.
And it's two short years, but actually it makes a very big difference into how willing families and foster families are at taking the risk of taking that young person into their home. I think just the fact that they're a teenager, there's assumptions around what sort of risk factors they might have, what sort of behaviour they might expect, and sometimes it's a case of, well, actually they are still teenagers. You know, anybody that owns a teenager like I do will tell you that it's not always a walk in the park, but it is very rewarding. And I think it's about understanding that, it's a wonderful time of a young person's life to be able to steer and navigate and mentor them. And it does come with its challenges, and as any stage of parenting does, but actually it's very rewarding as well.
So when the young people are in a residential setting and we haven't got enough fostering placements, what would you be doing with the young people really to prepare them if they are moved from a residential into a fostering placement? What sort of work would you do around preparing them for that transition?
Yeah, so we would work, my service would work with a foster family or a potential foster carer.
Wow, so you would actually work with that individual foster carer, it wouldn't be they're left on their own?
Absolutely not. We would start off by talking about what sort of rules and boundaries they have in their home, and we would make sure that we're implementing the same or very similar in the home for that young person, so that they know this is what's going to be expected in foster care. This is what you need to be complying with while you live in the home. Every home has rules and boundaries to follow, and these are your rules and boundaries while you're living here, and that's what we'll carry on into foster care. And then when they move in, those trusted adults, that same staff member that they've known all the way through, will continue to visit, will continue to support both the young person and build that relationship with the foster carer to just to smooth that transition for them, so that they have got somebody to turn to.
That consistent person who's been important to that in the life up until that point.
And has that real experience of what it's like to care for them as well, and can give the foster parent those sort of intimate details that you only know when you're actually living with somebody, and you know, those little things of like, oh, that will have upset them because XYZ, or oh, they'd love that. You know, that you only get to know by getting to know that person.
Yeah, of course. What how they want the food laid out on the plate, and
all of those
really important things that
those little things that are, as you say, very important when you're getting to know somebody and trying to build that strong foster care relationship.
And so how does the child feel as well? Have you got any insight into what they feel like when they are in the residential, knowing that we are actively looking for a fostering placement for them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the young people can feel quite I suppose it affects their self-esteem. They feel like it reflects on them as a person, that they're not being picked, that nobody wants them, and that they don't really understand like why nobody will give them a chance. You know, and we've had foster agencies that have said that, like, they've questioned us when we've given a profile to say, well, you've not listed any of their risks. It's like, oh, that young person doesn't have any risks, and they're a little bit like sort of unsure about that. And are you
almost
sure?
Like they're looking for risks when there's none there.
They're looking for a reason. Well, there must be something because she's living in a residential home. And so, well, that's not always the case. There really aren't the foster care placements around, especially for our teenage age group, that it does mean that sadly a lot of them do end up living in residential care,
and they don't necessarily need to be
Absolutely
in a residential.
Not. And the fear is that then, if nothing is found, that they will live their teenage years in a permanent residential home, which we don't want for any young person. That's not the right place for any young person. They should be with their own family or within a nurturing, caring, safe family unit to help them to live their young life
and for somewhere where they feel like they belong.
Yeah. They belong, exactly.
So what sort of things are people asking you when they say about risks? What things do they assume these teenagers have risks of?
So it can be drugs is a big one. You know, they're understandable risks that, you know, a lot of teenagers do go down the route of experimentation with drugs or alcohol, maybe going missing, as in that they're not keeping in touch with adults and we don't know where they are, or mental health is a big one, obviously, at the moment, especially sort of post-pandemic. A lot of the young people that have been through that in the last 5 years are now hitting teenage, and those mental health issues are starting to present themselves, and there's a rise in self-harm and issues related to that. So it is understandable that foster carers have got some apprehensions about whether they're capable of dealing with those issues. But actually a lot of it for our young people comes back to needing that family, needing somewhere to belong, needing a trusted adult to be able to work through some of that, so that they don't need to take it on into adult life.
Yeah. And so when you're looking for a foster carer for these children, what sort of thing would be on their profile? Is that the right word?
Young person's profile.
Young person's profile.
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to give as balanced a view as I can. I try and make sure that they get a flavour of who this young person is, of what they enjoy doing, what sort of things, especially what sort of things they could use to connect with them. Because it's one thing saying, oh, they like this type of music, but if that foster care is like, oh, I like a bit of that, do you know what I mean? The instant connection, they've got something to start those building blocks of relationships. So I try to put in as much of that, of things that they could do. Or do they like baking, or are they a bit outdoorsy and they'll like go in for a bit of a bike ride, or those sorts of things that they can do with a foster carer to start to build that relationship.
And I bet you people don't realise you're doing all those things in a residential with the young people. They don't see that those normal family things that everybody else would be doing on a day-to-day basis, you are doing in the residentials with the young people. This will.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them, as they are what we would call edge of care, they're not the young people that necessarily been in the care system from a very early age. A lot of them, they're in mainstream school, they have friends that they go out and spend time with, and the risks, as we were talking about before, are very much the same as they would be for any teenager that is starting to spend that bit more time out in the community, and you're having to talk to them not just about stranger danger, but getting into more age appropriate to them, what the risks are about drugs, about alcohol, that they are going to try vaping, they are going to try these things that are out there for them. And that's why they need us to be talking to them, informing them, not just saying, no, don't do that, but saying, listen, these are some of the risks. You need to start thinking about it for yourself, and maybe showing them some videos and
keeping that communication open with them.
Absolutely, that non-judgmental approach of understanding that every teenager on the planet, whatever home they come from, there's going to be stuff that they're going to want to try, that their mates are going to be like, oh, have you heard about this? Have you seen this? And there's going to be that temptation to do things that as adults we'd be like, oh, hold on a sec.
Yeah, it's about choices, isn't it? And giving the young people the skills to make those, what's a good choice and what's a bad choice.
And sometimes I feel like the young people that are in residential homes or in care, sometimes they get almost tarnished with this, as if because they're doing that, that shows that they are a certain type of young person, when actually those risks are there for all young people from all homes. They're all tempted, and a lot of them are experimenting behind parents' backs, and actually these are the most vulnerable ones that potentially, they need these nurturing homes. They need foster carers that will come around them and say, listen, I'm not judging, but let's have a conversation. Why is it that you want to try that? What's appealing to you about wanting to do that?
Yeah. And when young people have successfully moved into a fostering family from the residential, what does that look like for them? Can they still maintain those links with you if they need them, or?
Absolutely. We will stay in touch. As I said, we will support them in the initial stages, but if they want us to stay in touch for as long as they want us to, we will be ringing and checking in, do the odd visit and, come round for a couple.
So the foster care wouldn't be on their own?
Absolutely
Basically,
not.
they'd not only have the support around them from the fostering team, but they'd also have some support from the residential team.
And if things started to feel a bit shaky at any point, then we could put in a little bit more structured and organised support. And then when that was no longer needed, we would sort of fizzle away again, step back a little bit, give them some space to breathe. Let's see where things are up to now, and hopefully they can continue then with that child in their care.
And from your experience, how successful has it been, that transition for some of the children from residential to a family setting with a foster carer?
When we've been able to identify foster carers, we have had some really nice success stories. It's been lovely. One of our foster carers actually came and did some shifts working in the home to get to know one of our young people before it was identified that they would be fostering her. And when the social worker actually sat the young person down and said, "Listen, we found you a foster carer," she said, "Well, I hope it's such a body because I'm not going anywhere else." And she's like, yes, it is. And it was just lovely. And she
that bond was already established. Yeah, that's so fab.
And it was really, really touching to see. That's what you hope for. That's everything you hope for that young person. And it's absolutely lovely when you get to see them moving on into a successful foster placement. It's why we do what we do.
And why do you think it would be important that the foster carers come from the local community as well? What do you think is important about that for the young people?
So I think it's really important because if they are not living with their family, they're still going to have those support networks and links, maybe with school, sports clubs, their friends, neighbours, all those people in the community that form this wider support network around them. And we don't want to take that support network away from them. We want to work with that support network so that they're not feeling isolated, but also it gives the foster carer that support as well. That then they're not isolated on their own with the young person, that actually the school already have a relationship with them and say, well, listen, this is how it's been for the last few years. Or, there's school friends, parents who are like, oh, listen, why don't we take them out for something to do over the holidays or those sorts of things that foster.
It's all that village, isn't it? That we talk about.
Absolutely.
With parents all the time. The village is still needed when you're a foster carer as well, and it's still in place, isn't it, within the community?
Yeah, and it's less change. The less change for that young person, the better. They're moving to a new home, which is a massive change. New carers, massive change. But actually, if we can keep some of that other stuff in place, they're still going to the same school, football club's still the same on a Friday night. It just helps everybody to make that a smoother transition and gives it a greater chance that will be a successful placement for that young person.
Fab. So with regards to preparing the young people, I know we touched on it slightly earlier, but what sort of things would you do practically with the child, preparing them? Because I can imagine it's a really emotional thing for them to invest in going into a family and feeling almost like it's a risk for them, isn't it, to let themselves.
It is, absolutely. I mean, we're really lucky we have a clinical psychologist on staff who can offer them time to talk and open up and think about, how they might be feeling or the nerves or worries that they might have. If they want somebody outside the staff team to talk to about those things, then they've got them that they can speak to, and we try to just be very open and honest about what the process will look like. Practically, we'll make sure that they have they meet them for the first time in a safe place, that they will potentially come over to our home, the residential home. So it's sort of their patch, as it were, the young person, and helps them to feel secure and in a very nervy, scary situation, that they've got people around them. They can have their key worker from the home or whoever they feel most comfortable with to be in that first initial meeting to kind of smooth things over and help, if conversation stutters to a bit of a stop, that they can kind
just an extra pace and pushing it along.
Absolutely. And then, maybe we'd go out and do some different different activities in the community over a couple of weeks, so that they're getting to meet them and spend time with them and build memories already before they've even moved in. Then they get to go and have a look at the bedroom and start to move some of their stuff in. So it's not just a sort of overnight process. It might be over a couple of weeks while they're...
It's not instant, and it prepares them for quite a while before it actually happens.
Yeah, it's trying to strike that balance where you're not letting it drag on and on, because it is scary and so it does need to just happen. But equally, they've had plenty of opportunity to meet the foster carer, to get to know them, to spend some time, to see where they'll be living, and to feel confident that they get on together and it'll be a good match.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And one of the things that we're aware of over in the fostering side of things at the moment is that there's a lot of younger children going into residentials at the moment. Again, for reasons that you've just been discussing, that it's not a case of the child needs to be in a residential trust. There just aren't enough foster carers within our area at the moment. And what advice would you give someone who was thinking about fostering and heard that the child that they're going to foster is being in a residential?
My advice would be to ask for as much information as you can get about it, to come to it with an open mind, and just don't prejudge what that young person may or may not have been through, or why they've ended up in residential care. Just to have that open mind that actually the story may be very different from what you might expect as to why they've ended up in a residential home, and that they could be one of those young people that shouldn't be there. If we had more foster carers, wouldn't be there, and actually just need someone like yourself to take a risk and well, it's not even a risk really, but just to take that step and open their home to them. I would just, my recommendation would be to speak to the social worker, find out about them as much as you can, as much information before you're making the decision. Don't just discount them straight away because of the residential care. Do everything that you would do for any other placement for a child that you were considering for foster care.
Oh, that's really helpful, because I think sometimes people hear the word residential and, there's so many connotations with it, isn't there? There's been so many, dramatised versions of what a residential would look like, but actually it's a safe place for children to be when there aren't enough foster carers and fostering households to care for them, really, isn't it? And
yeah, absolutely. And I think, as well, you can always ask for information from the residential home. See if you can get a conversation with one of the carers that's looking after that child on a day-to-day basis, because they're the experts.
Yes, of course.
With the best will in the world, social workers will see them, every couple of weeks if they're lucky, but that care is there at 9 o'clock at night when they don't want to go to bed. They're there at 8 o'clock in the morning when they're struggling to find their tie for school. Yeah. All of those sorts of things. So if you can get that connection with somebody that is working with them in the residential home, they'll be able to tell you.
And, obviously you're the manager at one of the residential homes, and there's numerous residentials within our Foster4 area of Cheshire and Merseyside, and every staff member would be happy to talk to anyone considering about fostering, wouldn't they? About any of the children.
Absolutely, they'd be delighted, because like I say, that's our dream for them, for all of them. That's our goal. As I said before, no young person deserves to live in residential care when there's other options out there. So that every staff member would be delighted if it gave that young person opportunity to live in a family.
Fantastic. Oh, Chantelle, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I hope it's given our listeners a bit of an insight into another area of fostering, and giving you all some food for thought about considering caring for older children.